Portfolio Composer, episode 172.
You're listening to the Portfolio Composer podcast with your host and coach, Garrett Hope, where he teaches you what it takes to master the business end of writing music through mindset, marketing, and business skills. Make sure to sign up for the newsletter at theportfoliocomposer.com for exclusive offers, business insights, and information not shared on the podcast. And now, for this episode of the Portfolio Composer.
It's something that we all can rally around and that there's a connection that I can make. And a lot of times, I think you told me this back when we were coaching. It's not just the music that people are interested in. It's the story behind the music. It's your story. They want to know what it is that brought you to the piece.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Portfolio Composer. I am your host, your coach, and your teacher, Garrett Hope. One of the joys of what I'm doing here as I learn and discover more about what it means to be a composer in the 21st century, and I am trying so hard to share that with the rest of you, with this community of composers, is that I have gotten the opportunity to work with several people one-on-one. And today's guest is one of those people. Michael Bussewitz-Quarm contacted me a few years ago now, I think it is, Michael, and said that he'd been listening to the podcast and was interested in some coaching, and we began working together. And I thought it would be so great to feature him as an episode for a number of reasons. Primarily because Michael is a composer in process, just like the rest of us. And most of the interviews, if you've listened to this podcast for any time, are with people who, for most appearances, have made it. For one reason or another, they have reached a tremendous amount of success in their life. And sometimes that can feel very distant and discouraging. So as a way to provide hope for you, the listener, that you too can move in that direction, I want to show you a composer who's doing everything he can do right now to get to where he wants to be, and also to celebrate the hard work he's done, because I know firsthand that he's put in a lot of effort into building his business. So, Michael, welcome to the Portfolio Composer.
Garrett, it's so great to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm really excited about this.
Me too.
Michael is passionate about advocacy. He is a New York-based composer, conductor, and speaker. His most recent works include the commissioned work The Road That Has No End and Requiem Dies Magna, which premiered in September 2017 on Long Island under Michael's direction. Michael recently organized the Child Refugee Awareness and Hope for Recovery Choral Consortium projects and the Great American Coral Reef, to be premiered on Earth Day 2019. So people who have listened to the podcast for a while might recognize your name and some of these consortium projects, because I actually featured this plus your Concert for Peace in the announcement section of the podcast for a brief time this spring. And so why don't we just kind of, before we get there though, let's talk about your journey on how you have come to be a composer and kind of where you're in your business now.
Well, it's been a long road. I feel like, launching my self-publishing business at age 44, I think it was, or maybe it was 43, because I'm 46 now. I feel like I'm kind of a late bloomer, so to speak. I've been writing music my whole entire life. When I was teaching for 10 years back in Huntington, I wrote for my choirs. I've written on and off since then. I've always seen myself as a composer and a conductor who teaches. I love working with choirs. I love working with kids, but my true passion has always been composing. And when you're teaching, trying to find the time to forget about launching a business, but just to write music is challenging. So I feel like it's been a long and winding road.
Yeah. Tell us about some of those challenges. What were you facing?
Well, as you know, Garrett, my situation is rather unique. One of the reasons I left teaching was because I have juvenile rheumatoid arthritis, which is can be very debilitating at times. And to actually, I give teachers a lot of credit because I'm telling you, it is quite a physical challenge to get in and to be on your game every single day. And not just be on your game, but, especially at the younger ages, you have to, I feel that teachers have to be performers. They have to connect with their audience. And if they want to get goals across, there's a lot of effort that goes into that, energy, emotion, and whatnot. And, so balancing that and teaching, was always tricky for me. And then, when I really realized I had to leave teaching, when I just could not do it any longer, I had some odd jobs, working at a church, and teaching piano lessons. And again, those things are balancing, trying to stay in remission. And also, as you know, I have a family. I have 2 beautiful daughters and a wonderful wife who's extremely supportive. And I finally decided that I was going to launch the business. And with my wife's support, we said, all right, we're going to struggle a little bit. But she really believes in me. And I, have this vision about how it's going to work. And I think the best thing I did was start literally listening to podcasts. I started listening to Amy Porterfield.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if, when she was, I think she's called Online Marketing Made Easy, but she had a big focus on Facebook at first.
Yeah.
And then I found Smart Passive Income with Pat Flynn, which is a wonderful podcast. And then I discovered Composer on Fire, which now is Portfolio Composer. And then everything that Pat Flynn and Amy Porterfield was saying started making sense, because now, what your podcast does, it just brings it home for me. Even the ones, even the episodes that don't necessarily particularly deal with choral composing. There's so much information there that connects, that correlates to what I'm doing, or that you could kind of transfer. Anyway, so that's kind of when I started really being able to develop a game plan. Actually, it wasn't at the very beginning when I first got my DBA, for the business. But it came shortly after that, and I feel like that's when things started really blossoming and taking off for me.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm honored that I get to be a part of your story, Michael. I'm happy to be a part of that journey.
Yes. And I'm glad you're a part of the story too.
Well, it's funny because I listen to those same podcasts and I learned so much from them too. But a lot of that on the advice on those shows, as fabulous as it is for building businesses that aren't selling an artistic product. And I'm always trying to figure out, okay, so what do these principles mean and how do we then apply that to being a composer? And that's part of what I'm doing here. So I'm glad that you found that useful.
Very much so. Very much so. I mean, when we started working, one of the things that you spoke about was, we talked about having reachable goals, and planning things out. And just through that process alone, I really felt like I had a sense of direction. So that moves away from the podcast and more to, remember we had like some coaching sessions at the beginning when I first discovered your podcast.
Yeah.
And through that process, I really, that was just so important for me to have a map and to have a sense of like long-term and short-term goals. And the other thing that you really kind of woke me up to, if you don't mind me just adding this in, is the idea of consortiums. Consortiums. I'm not sure. Tomato. Like
I don't really know either.
Alex Shapiro had talked about that. There's another one. You had this incredible interview, one of my favorite interviews, and actually I go back to it and I listen to it. There's certain people that you had on, like Megan Enan, I think her name is.
Yep.
And but Alex Shapiro was one of my first coaches, so to speak, because I went into the city to New York to see her and the late Stephen Paulus. And I'm trying to remember the lawyer's name, but the three of them held a seminar on or not just self-publishing, but just having a career as a writer. And you know, we became friends through time, and she mentored me. And so she actually was the first one to bring up the idea of consortiums, but I didn't really buy into it with me. I felt that wasn't for me. Why? I don't remember why, but I just felt it wasn't for me. And boy, now that I'm doing them, I realize, man, this is such a great way to bring your music out to the world. It's wonderful for so many reasons. And you through our coaching, I think that's when I started really saying, you know, let me try this thing that is difficult for me. Like, in other words, I felt like I couldn't make a connection to the idea of a consortium. And through our coaching, that's when I started saying, oh, you know what, there is a path to this. And boy, you know, that's important, trying something new, you know?
Yeah. Well, let's kind of dig into that, because you've brought up a few things. You started your story by saying that you're really entering this in the middle of your life, and it's kind of a career change in the sense that you're focusing this as your primary effort. And there were some really hard challenges. I think a lot of composers feel the way you did, that if you don't start when you're 21 or something, you're too far behind the 8 ball.
Right.
So what kind of things did you do? What was your mental process to overcome that specific challenge? And what are you doing now?
Okay. Well, a few things come to mind. First is the idea of no regrets. You know, we're composers, right? So everything that we do in life leads us to the music that we put down at this particular time. So I'm a better composer because I was a much better composer because I was a teacher. I'm a better composer because of the struggles I've had with staying in remission, the struggles I've had when I've, been in full-blown active relapses. I'm a better composer because of my daughters. I'm a better composer because of all these different struggles and everything. And, you know, every single commission I earn, every single purchase is so sweet, you know, because of that. So I try to keep in mind that even though I'm starting later, everything that, you know, all of this life story goes into my music. And I think that also is why that people can make a connection. You know, I feel that one of my strengths is that, you know, people come up to me and they say, you know, that music spoke for me, you know, and that's just, you know, I was just in Vancouver at the International Society of Contemporary Music New Music Days for 2017. And one of my pieces was performed. And at the very end, the piece is called I'll Fly Away. And it's about the idea of somebody that is on their deathbed. They're at the end of their life. They've gone through a great deal of struggle physically. And yet, because they had such wealth in their life with the person that they loved, that they are remembering all the good times, and they just have so much beauty in their life that the end, passing from here to whether it's heaven or life eternal or however you do it, was a very beautiful experience, a very beautiful, anyway, somebody came up to me afterwards, this woman, she's in her 90s. Her name was Mary. And she took my hand. She waited in line to speak to me. And she took my hand and she said, that song was for my husband. And I was just like blown away by that. You know, I asked her if I could give her a hug, and she's like, yeah. So I gave her a hug. And, you know, that's what it's all about, right? And, you know, maybe if I had jumped in, you know, early on and not gone through the things I had gone through, that song would be different. That song might not have made that connection. So I think that I'm very wordy on this. The point is that, you know, your life experience, you know, if you're jumping late into the game, there's a reason for that, you know. And the other thing too that really has been a challenge for me is, and I don't know if it's this way when you're 20. I guess maybe it is in some ways, but in other ways it might not be. But you know, when you're in your 40s, there's some things that you're really good at, and then there's some things that you're not very good at. And when you jump into a business, it's a sharp learning curve.
Oh yeah.
You know, and you feel like, oh, I have to really turn this around quickly and learn this. And one of the things that I'm starting to realize now is that nothing is like insurmountable. I look at my printer when I first bought my printer, and I was like, it was like a phobia, like I don't know what this button does or this button does. It's very complicated. Just a silly printer, but it's it's one of those 11 by 17 printers with the what is that called? The thing that folds and staples on the side.
Oh, a duplex machine or a finishing machine?
Yeah.
I can't remember. Yeah.
That's it. The finish. And, eventually you just take your time and you learn how to master it, just like finale, it's like, or engraving, something that, I'd love to be able to hand it off to somebody and just have them engrave the entire piece for me. But, that's not really financially possible right now. The point is that there's going to be a lot of things that when you go in that are just going to feel like mountains, and you just take one step at a time. Like literally nothing is insurmountable if you just keep working at it. And I think that's really one of the things that I had to have like a mindset type of change when I first went into it. When I first said, all right, this is what I'm going to do. And I was like, every other day, I was like, oh my God, I forgot I have to do this now, or I have to do that. And then, and then you start realizing, you'll get it. Just take it one step at a time.
That's beautiful, Michael. I really like that. I like how you pointed out that you're really a culmination of the life that went before, and there's nothing wrong with the journey you've been on, and that nothing is insurmountable. It's wonderful piece of advice. I'm curious what some of the things that you just spoke about are. You said that there was a steep learning curve when you decided to go into business. I mean, you have been an educator. You have multiple degrees. I mean, you're no chump. And
right. Yeah.
There's a whole different skill set to running what you do as a composer as a business. So what do you wish you had known, or what were some of the things you had to learn right away?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, I think the one thing that, and you've spoken about this with multiple guests on your podcast, and we spoke about this in coaching too, is the idea of building your list. And I just feel that is one of the most important things. Networking and list building are two of the most important. They're kind of go hand in hand, right?
Yeah.
Two of the most important things that you could do as a composer, especially a self-publisher. You don't have any company that's going to be taking 90% of the profit and then giving away a bunch of that profit to distributors and whatever the business involved is. But they're also going to be marketing for you. And there's a great sense of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Relief when you know that you have a publishing company that's putting your name out there, but when you're a self-publisher, you're it. You're basically it. And so, building that list and getting out a newsletter, an interesting newsletter, a quality newsletter, not making it perfect because there's no time for perfection, but, just a quite like honest, but very good quality newsletter, is really important because that keeps you in the forefront, or the reminder, to your fans that, the fans of your music that you're out there. And then networking is just so incredibly important. I used to be incredibly shy. I did not like to be I could just be home watching a movie or just be with my wife and just be happy and go to the mountains. That's my escape place is the White Mountains in New Hampshire or the Green Mountains of Vermont. I love solitary, just like being in the woods, just, looking at the mountains at the top of the mountain, that kind of thing. But now I love the atmosphere of conferences. I just love them. And I have made some incredible connections through conferences just by sitting in the session. And after the session is over, going up to the conductor and saying, man, that was great. I loved what you did. And there's always something that you will love. If you're really like into it, you sit there as a composer, even like when you have a person doing a session and it's just like reading other people's music. Well, you could sit there as a composer and look at that music and and say, look what they did here. Look at what they did here. I like that. This is what's being published now. There's some great ideas here. Or you could even say, wow, this is how they, if it's not a piece that you're really connecting with, look at how the publisher engraved this, let me take notes on how this looks, because I never really looked at it that way when I was a teacher,
Yeah.
But you go up to the person afterwards that's running the session, who's usually a conductor. You introduce yourself if you don't know them already. You say, yeah, that was great. I really liked this and that. And, it kind of helps them too, because you're affirming, they're working hard to give the best session possible. And anyway, that's, I went to the upstate, to the New York Summer ACDA and American Choral Directors Association and the NISBA conference this summer. And I got to meet Rollo Dilworth. I don't know if you recognize that name, but
big name in the choral world.
Yeah, and he's so nice. He's so nice. And I sat through the session. It was a great session. And, I went up to him afterwards just to introduce myself and just say I really enjoyed the session. And he's the one that kept the conversation going. He's the one that said, when I said I did say I was a composer. I offered that much. He was interested in my music. I said, hey, I have a table up. I'll get some music. And he's like, that's great. He's like, I was looking for something to read on the flight home. So now I have some, I'll look at your music on the flight home. I'm like, this is great, So, people are exceptionally nice, and you just have to just start that conversation, and offer and give. Start the conversation by giving, right? There's this book out called Give and Take. I'm drawing a blank on the name of the author. It's called Give and Take. And so when you go up to the session leader, I can't remember the name of what the appropriate title is of session leader, but when you go up to them afterwards, give a little bit, say, this is what say, I really enjoyed this, without expecting anything back, because,
yeah,
once you're setting them up, then you might be disappointed. But even just saying, my name is Michael, I really, enjoyed how you were breaking this down, and I said to him, I said, as a composer, I said, this is great. This gives me great ideas for my music going forward, that you're looking at it this way, and then he offered, and then he was interested in my music.
In the podcast, we speak a lot about giving value, and that's exactly what you did. You actually contributed to that person's life without expecting anything in return. Yeah.
And, sometimes the conversation is short.
Yeah.
But most of the time it's not. Most of the time. And also, the other thing too, you don't want to go up to somebody and when they're wiped out and exhausted. Another person I met at that session, and this is cool, and you've helped me a lot with this actually, is Andrea Ramsey. She was conducting one of the choirs. Talk about a nice person. Oh, she's great. And we got to talking, and I was like, look, I said, I know you're tired and everything. So, I tried to give her an option to step out of the conversation for a bit, because she was in between rehearsal. They were taking a break. And I just wanted to introduce myself. She wanted to keep talking. And I was like, this is great. So anyway, I'm actually starting my own podcast, and she's going to be a guest on my podcast.
Oh, excellent.
Which is really cool. Yeah. And so that's another way of giving, right? Because she's another composer. I'm actually going to talk to her about her music and her passions in music. She's been a middle school adjudicator, or a middle school, specialist for so long, but she also really loves working with high school groups. And I said, hey, let's talk about that then, And so we're not talking about my music in this case. We're talking about her music. But, it's like what you do basically is you give a bunch of great information and connect people and stuff like that. And, I'm sure that you've seen it return in fourfold in your own career, I'm guessing.
Well, thank you. That means a lot to me. And Andrea's an interesting person because she was at the top of the academic pile. She was on a tenure track position at CU Boulder,
right,
in choral faculty, and she last year stepped away from it all just so she can write music full time.
How about that? I didn't know that.
Yeah,
No.
and what she credits for that is the fact that she is self-published, and now she can earn the money from self-publishing that she couldn't make through traditional publishing. And she has dozens of pieces with traditional publishers.
Well, I know. I actually, I mean, I haven't taught for 14 years now, 13, something like that. And I taught for 10 years before that. And we did Andrea Ramsey. I was a 5th grade course teacher. So we did Andrea Ramsey pieces. And so, you know, to get to meet her, you know, I'm thinking like rock star kind of thing, you know, like, and I'm going up to her. I'm like, I know this person. I know this name, you know. And then to know that now I'm going to be like having a conversation with her on a podcast is like, whew, you know, I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So if we step back to kind of the business skills you had to learn, and networking and list building you came out as two of the biggest and most important. And would you include those in your 3 business tips for things people should do? They should just network and get over their introversion? Or how would you recommend that? Because you're still an introvert.
Okay. I really am. Well, I have a very unique story. I wasn't sure how this was going to come out in the interview, but you know, into this conversation. But as you know, and I think this is important, and I'm going to try to make this so that it kind of speaks to a lot of different people, a lot of different situations. But I'm transgender, and I'm out as being transgender, obviously, or else I wouldn't say it right now. But I wasn't always. And, you know, being married with kids and everything, it's been quite a journey. And just as a personal note, the reason why we've been able to succeed is constantly communicating with each other. And I guess that's true for anybody who's, you know, going through any sort of transition, whether it's gender transition, whether it's a career transition, whether it's building your business and everything. And if you have a spouse or a partner or something like that, the idea is to keep the doors open in terms of communicating. You know, even like, you know, hey, there's this great conference in Chicago in June. Can we find a way to make me go? You know, and it's like, well, this is going to be an ongoing conversation because, you know, everything that I do, you know, affects her and affects the kids as well in one way or another. But in terms of being introverted and then being able to, and then going from that point to looking forward to networking, I actually decided at one point or another, with support from Alex Shapiro first, with your support actually too, because when we had the coaching, we discussed this, and most importantly, with my wife's support, I decided to live uniquely as myself, and to be myself. And I think that's true for anybody, you know, there's this thing which you've discussed before in podcasts and I'm sure that it came when we were doing coaching too, the thing called imposter syndrome.
Oh, yes.
And it exists on a lot of different levels. One is trying to be somebody else. You know, it's like you have an idea of what a choral composer is supposed to look like. You know, there's some rock stars in the choral community, and part of you is like, oh, I should really go down that path and emulate them. It really wasn't until I started really being true to myself, but, you know, personally in terms of my identity, but also in terms of my composition and my voice in music, that I really started going places and started making connections with people and started really like, connecting with people both, you know, as a person. And I have more in common now that I'm out transgender than I, you know, with people than I did back before I transitioned. And it's not because they're transgender. It's because I'm just totally opening myself up, and there's a lot of things that I have in common with people. You know, there's a connection to be made almost everywhere you go with the people, as long as you give first and then you listen, and then you'd be like, yeah, I can hook on to that. You know, I get that, you know. So, you know, the other thing, Garrett, that I wanted to bring up that I think that you've spoken about before too is, it's kind of along the lines of 1,000 True Fans. But, you know, I haven't really read that book yet. I think there's a book out there called that, if I'm not mistaken.
It's a blog post, but yeah.
Okay. I think there's a correlation to that for anybody. But the other thing too is, how many choral composers are out there right now that are trying to, earn a living doing this or earn some income doing this?
Oh, thousands.
Let's say there's thousands. Let's just round it up to like 10,000, and then, how many of them are working as hard as you are?
Mm-hmm.
Then that narrows it down, and what if you're like at the top 10%, of the people in terms of working hard, in terms of putting the effort in, and not the time, but the quality, because still a lot of people are working other jobs and what to make ends meet, and then you narrow it down. Like, what about those people that are working just as hard, but also have this music that speaks to people, And now that circle gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and you don't feel overwhelmed by the number of 10,000. It's up to where you place yourself in that 10,000. And then I think the other tip that I have that I feel is really, really important. It was really important for me to start realizing this, and you don't realize this right away, and you don't even get this right away. At least I didn't. And that is that. Well, let me ask you as a composer, when you have a commission, what is the time frame? What's the perfect time frame for actually starting pen to paper and then finishing up the piece?
Are you actually asking me?
Yeah. For you, personally, I don't know if you've ever, I know they're all different, commissions are all different in terms of time frames. But if you had the ideal situation, what would it be?
Okay, so if I could do this one thing and nothing else, not divide my time.
Right.
And it would obviously depend on the scope of the work. But I've been writing a lot for large ensembles and then for movies. So those are pretty big projects. So I ideally, I would have anywhere from 3 to 6 months per project.
Okay, so 3 to 6 months. When does the piece actually start gelling? Would you say? Day 2? Not day 2,
writing?
Right?
Well, see, this is where it gets fuzzy because the projects overlap, right? So while I'm writing Project A and wrapping Project A up, Project B is rolling around in the back of my mind. So the time I'm ready to start writing notes onto the staff paper for Project B, I've already thought through some of the problems. So this is a hard thing for me to say, when is it gelling? But
I understand.
I would probably say after I've already begun writing music. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel it's the same way with the business. Your business is like a great composition, right? It's one of your life compositions. And you said this before, you could slowly build your business, or you could just try to shoot right to the top. And if you ever try to shoot right to the top with a composition, you look at it a year later and you're like, I could have done this differently. I could have done that differently, whatever. You maybe not necessarily make totally proud of it, but you might also feel that there wasn't the depth that you could have put into it, right? So, it's the same thing. Like, I was very frustrated when I first started my business because I said, why aren't things happening? Why aren't I getting phone calls? I have a website up. Why aren't, I actually say on my Facebook page that I write music. Why isn't everybody just knocking on my door saying, I want to buy a Bussewitz-Quarm piece, right?
If you build it, they will come, right?
So that's the thing. And so, 2 years down the road, now I'm starting to see the traction. Now I'm starting to hear, I just set up a table at a local music teachers conference. It was band, orchestra, chorus, all music teachers. It was election day. There was a symposium. I set up a table, not knowing what to do. I only signed up 2 people to my newsletter, and I only gave out a couple of I'm drawing a blank on what a catalog. I only gave out a couple of catalogs. And then towards the end, somebody came up to me from one of the local districts and said, "Hey, I've been meaning to ask you. I'd like you to do a commission." I'm like, "Wow, this is great," and it's because he's seen over the last couple of years that I've been in the field. I've been doing, I've been writing music and everything like that. So it's rolling around in people's minds, and so things now in year 2.5 are starting to gel. Just now, I wish it happened in day 2. I wish it happened in the second month of, it would have been a lot better because I could have reinvested that money and built, but it takes time, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. In fact, you might be doing everything right, because the idea is maybe take a look at year 5 and see where you are, and think about how you're growing this network and how you're growing your business so that so many different people, and really, really value those people that go out of their way to help you along the way. Really value those people.
Yeah.
There's a number of people that I feel like, they're at the top of my circle, my team, and some of them are people who are helping with the business, like yourself, like Katie Ballantine up in Ithaca, like Matt Curtis for Choral Tracks.
Yeah.
And then there's other people that are actually choral directors that have, ordered my music twice or 3 times now, been part of my consortium, and so, they really value me as a person and as a composer. And, that took time to build.
Yeah. Well, Michael, I want to take the time to point out here, though, I mean, yes, it takes time, and you're 100% right. But if you were not taking action over that time, you would still be where you were 2 years ago. Merely putting up
absolutely.
a website, merely saying on Facebook, I'm a composer, hire me, and having a professional page does nothing. You did that,
Nothing.
But then you showed up. And you and more than just showing up, and that's huge, right? That's probably more than 50%.
Yeah.
You then engaged, you gave, as you described, you added value, and you have learned how to make the ask. And I think this is the hardest part, is you learning to sell. At some point, you have to say, buy my music or commission me. What has that process been like for you, learning to make the sale?
Well, I'll tell you that I'm really glad you brought that up, because it's something that I have wanted to talk about. I'm very excited about this. And again, it goes back to consortium. The benefits. It's a win-win-win type of situation when it comes to consortiums. You find what people are passionate about, and what you're passionate about that connects to people. And one of my first consortiums that I did was the Child Refugee Awareness Choral Consortium. And I found a poem online that was written by a 9-year-old refugee, Azerbaijani refugee. Her name is Lamia. I fell in love with the poem. I bookmarked it about 4 years ago. I just rediscovered it last year. And I said, let me try to find the publisher. I found the publisher. The publisher was very excited about the fact that I was going to bring attention to child refugees. There are, I think, over 40 million child refugees in the world today. This is a crisis of epic proportions. And it's just incredibly sad. And the attention needs to be brought to it. And I'm not the only one that thinks that. There are 19 choir directors who signed on to be part of the consortium. Through my discussions on Facebook and talking about it, and having it all set up on my website. I've recruited basically, or 19 choral directors have joined me on this journey of creating this song. Actually, 2 songs in this case. It's a unique type of situation with this consortium. And the other thing I did was I decided that 50% of the commission would go to Lamia because she is the one that inspired the poem, and I wanted to help her out. She was a refugee as a child. Usually that means that even later on in life, there's financially they go through struggles. And in this case, long story short, it turned out we found Lamia, who's living in Azerbaijan in a different city now and has her own 2 kids. And the publisher is actually traveling to Azerbaijan, giving her the 50% of the commission. And it's a great story. And a lot, the choir directors are very excited about all of this, about the story behind it. And I don't think all consortiums go this way, but we have this common, this consortiums, whether it's this consortium or the Hope for Recovery consortium dealing with the opioid crisis, or the upcoming consortiums I'm doing, it's something that we all can rally around, and that there's a connection that I can make. And a lot of times, I think you told me this back when we were coaching, it's not just the music that people are interested in. It's the story behind the music. It's your story. Mm-hmm. They want to know what it is that brought you to the piece. So now I have 19 choirs performing Lamia's song and the other song, which is very similar in title, My Name is Lamia, Don't Call Me Refugee. And they're going to be performing, so 19 choirs are going to be performing this. One of them is, one of the choir directors is the literature, the resources and literature person for ACDA down in South Carolina, I think. Another one is the president of the New Jersey ACDA, the New Jersey ACDA. People with great connections, and really nice people too. And so there are going to be all these people listening to, 19 choirs, right? So hundreds of kids performing, hundreds and some adults, and then hundreds, maybe thousands of audience members, hearing the piece. And, so that's a great way to start, a piece, and to help it go viral, so to speak, through these consortiums. And you make it so that it's affordable to opt in. In fact, I had some sponsors. I had some of the choirs could not afford, to opt into a consortium. Their programs are either just starting up or else they come from programs that don't have any funding whatsoever. And there are some people that are really passionate about making a difference and bringing awareness to the child refugee crisis. And I had 4 sponsors that opted in to sponsor choirs. So there was this great team, around me. And I have to say, I love doing consortiums. And this is from somebody who was afraid of doing consortiums at first.
So let's bring this back around to selling then. You had to make the ask of these groups to commit money and time to your project.
Yeah.
How'd you do it?
Oh, that's still a hard thing to do. And there's a fine line between promoting yourself in Facebook groups and selling yourself. And it still is something I'm still trying to figure out and work through. But I'd say most of the people, most of the choirs were through Facebook groups, choral Facebook groups, where I did bring it up and talk about it. And there were 2 major sponsors, major commissioners. One was a local group, and then one was a group that's the Omaha Children's Choir in Nebraska. And so I feel like, I don't know if it was luck that I got 2 major commissioners, and then the rest were, so I'm kind of jumping around here because it's really kind of, I'm still kind of learning, One thing I will say though is that there's different levels that people can opt in, and by the way, major commissioners, get the PDF and, to reproduce, but also get 2 Skype sessions. And they get prime, they get listed at the very top separately from the other groups. And then the participating choirs is the next level. And that is an $80 opt-in. And the reason I kept it under $100 is because I knew that there were going to be some teachers that might be interested in doing this. And to get a PDF that they can reproduce for their choir and also a Skype session with a composer is great value for $80.
Yeah, it is.
I know I'm starting out, and I know that, that by giving them a good experience, they're going to come back again. And they're going to also recommend the piece. I just had one of the arrangements that I'm doing for this for this consortium is I have SATB, I have SSAA, I have 3-part mixed and 2-part treble. But one of the teachers asked for a unison and flute. It's like, all right, I'll do unison and flute. And I sent it to her, and she wrote back to me. Actually took a while for her to write back to me, and she really in great detail went into like why this would work, why this might not work. And, and there were some concerns she had. I was like, this is great. I thanked her. I said, thank you for putting so much time into this, because this is going to be a better piece because of this feedback. And she wrote back and she's like, I didn't expect you to be so open to this critique. And I'm thinking, why wouldn't I be? The idea is for you to like this, and also for you then to want to share it with other, choir teachers. So if you're going to struggle with these particular things, you're not going to recommend it, or other people are also going to have the same concern.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I made those changes, and she loves it now, and she loved it before, but it was going to be hard for her to actually get it to her group So I think the whole entire idea, and this brings me to something else too, is the idea of listen to critiquing, because it's going to make you stronger and a better, business. And some of the most blunt criticisms in the past where people are like, I can't believe he spoke to you that way. Like, yeah, well, you know what? I'm really glad he said it, because nobody else is saying that,
Mm-hmm.
Like, for example, my engraving in the beginning was very mediocre. And you don't want to be very mediocre when you're trying to sell your music. And I had a friend, an acquaintance, who said that. He said publicly on Facebook, he said, this looks like, it looks very unprofessional. And people got on him like, how could you be so, cruel and everything? I was like, no, you're missing the point. I'm trying to be a self-publisher here. Yeah, it's a hard lesson to learn, but my music looks a lot better now, and it's because of that.
Yeah, and engraving means it goes a long way. It's the primary communication of your musical thought to the performer, so it matters.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, Michael, we should start rounding this off so we can head into the lightning round. Is there anything else you wanted to say that I failed to ask?
Well, we talked about a lot of great stuff.
Yeah, it's been tremendous.
I think that we covered a lot.
Well, I want to, again, thank you for letting me be a part of the story. I'm glad that you've gotten value out of the podcast. I am doing this for composers just like you, who are out there trying to build a business so that you can impact the world around you through the music you make and pay your bills at the same time.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to the lightning round. Hey folks, I want to invite you to join the Portfolio Composer community on Patreon. You can find out more at Patreon, patreon.com/portfolio. This is a way for you to support the show. If you listen to the podcast and get any value at all out of these interviews, then please consider just donating $1 a month so that I can continue doing this at an ever higher level. I have lots of plans for 2018, and I want to produce more content for you guys and better content. And if you donate at a higher level, you can participate in the group coaching plans. And so that is a pretty fantastic resource. I hope you consider it. If you've been on the fence at all, please consider just joining the Portfolio Composer community at patreon.com for $1 a month. It would mean a lot to me.
Welcome to the lightning round.
All right, Michael, if you could turn back the clock, what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
Well, I have two ways of approaching this. I've thought about this a little bit. And my first one is kind of like changing the paradigm a little bit. And I want to actually say nothing. And the reason I say that is because my path was unusual, but I think it was an important path to go on. So I don't have any regrets about any obstacles that I ended up hitting along the way. Mm-hmm. With that being said, the other way of looking at this is the advice I would give my 20-year-old self is that embrace criticism. As long as it's not done in a mean-hearted way, or it's not done in a way that somebody might be saying something to, how do I put it? If they're envious of where you are or something like that, and they're critical, just to kind of bring themselves up. But be grateful for those people that say things to you that actually will help you along the path. Try to accept it, because I didn't do that at first. Or else the other thing too is be more understanding if people don't call back right away. People are busy. I get that now. I miss emails. And I feel really bad about it. But now I understand, whereas the 20-year-old self was quite offended when somebody didn't call back or somebody didn't respond to looking at my music right away. Well, they got really a lot of going on in their lives, and so I think the patience is really important.
Good. What is a personal habit of yours that you feel leads to your success?
That was the toughest question out of all of them. I don't know if it's necessarily habit, but I think the idea of being true to yourself, like listening to your inner voice, to your inner song, and trusting that. Not trying to emulate somebody else. I mean, other people's music will come into your head. There's one person in particular that, you're going to ask me that question about, I wish I wrote that.
Yeah.
That piece that kind of just like really stands out and everything. There's this one person that just like, I hear his music and then I can't get it out of my head. And it's very much like that. But, the idea of really embracing the song within, and just being yourself, is I think helped lead to my success. In fact, the piece that was just featured at the International Festival in Vancouver was a piece that actually I wrote the words to. It's the only one that actually I wrote the lyrics to. I came up with them myself. And it was a very personal piece, the song I'll Fly Away, about the idea of being at the end of your life and having this great wealth in your life that you look back on and find peace within. That was all very much an inner voice that was coming out. And I never really thought that it would be a marketable piece because of that. And yet it's found a home in my catalog.
Michael, what is an instrument you have always wanted to learn to play, and why?
The cello. I love the cello.
So your daughter plays cello, right?
Yes, she does. And I hope she loves it as much as I think she does. She's really beginning to get into it. I try not to impose my own, my kid is pitching for the varsity team because of the fact that I want to be a baseball player kind of thing,
Right.
I try to let I don't get involved in their practicing. I let them do their own practicing. And I really, I made that mistake when they were young. I tried to get very, very involved. I have to let them do their own thing, and they're doing quite well. But I have to say, the person that really got me to really fall in love with the cello is Yo-Yo Ma. I know it's not very original, but he spoke to me when, not just listening to him, but seeing him perform and not knowing where the instrument ends and the person begins. And, it's just such a beautiful, beautiful experience seeing him so intimately bringing out music from his cello. It's just wonderful. So I have always wanted to learn and play the cello.
I love it. One of the things about Yo-Yo Ma is he makes it look effortless. Like it is part of his body almost. And
speaking of the inner song, I mean, he's such a nice man.
He is.
Everything that I've seen about him and his projects, I mean, that's music. That is just, he's very diverse too. I love that he embraces all different types, talk about networking.
Yeah. So this next question is the one you were referring to a moment ago. But what is one composition that had a profound impact on you and why? And this doesn't have to be concert music.
Well, I mean, John Williams had a big impact on me as a kid, and really got me into music and loving music. But the person that seems to speak to me was Rachmaninoff too. But the person I was speaking about before that, I end up going and writing something that's so similar, is Hans Zimmer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Thin Red Line. I don't know if you've ever heard the.
Oh yes.
From Thin Red Line.
Yep.
Oh, just, and I don't remember the storyline very well. I know it was a film about war, and I know that they got people into the movie theater to see this film by saying it featured some very A-list actors that only made appearances at the end, a cameo at the end. I think George Clooney was in that, and I almost feel that, the message was that, this is a very important film and we want to get you in here. And anyway, I'm kind of going off topic here. The music is it's just so incredibly powerful to the storyline. And I came away wanting to write that and being frustrated that it was already written. It was one of those things that didn't make sense to me, but it was so anyway, so I embrace his music. It's just beautiful. There was another piece he did recently, another movie that he wrote for, and I feel the same thing. It was Interstellar.
Oh, okay.
Interstellar. Incredible storyline and beautiful music. Such a well done film, and Hans Zimmer's music just is so powerful in that. And
I want to drill you down here and say which Rachmaninoff and which John Williams score make the most impact
Star
on
Wars
you?
And Rocky 3. Star Wars when I was a kid, I would put on our record player. I had this little gray box of a record phonograph player. I would arrange the furniture in the living room, and I would stand there and conduct it with a wooden spoon. And that would be my London Symphony Philharmonic, or so it was Star Wars. It was Star Wars all the way. And Rachmaninoff, Rocky III, the third piano concerto. I'm speechless.
Oh, excellent! That's tremendous music.
Yeah.
What about music by a minority or female composer? Is there a piece or composer you feel like we should all get to know?
There are quite a few, and I had trouble narrowing it down to one. But there is, I have to say that I know the people more than I know their music, which I have to reverse that and really get to know their music. But one piece that I heard that I just loved is, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing her last name correctly, is Abby Patinas.
Yeah, I believe you are.
Yeah, and she's a Minneapolis-based composer, and she wrote a piece that is just gorgeous called "Be Like the Bird," and it was written. This is public information, so I could share this because it's in her program notes. But she was completing her second cancer treatment, her cancer treatment for a second time, and she said she her and her family sent it out as a Christmas card in 2009. And it's just such a beautiful, beautiful piece. And I heard it performed by Dr. Ann Matlack in a concert that she was performing one of my pieces on too, and the Harmonium Choral Society singers in New Jersey, in Madison, New Jersey. So just a beautiful voice. Abby Patinas has just a beautiful voice.
Lovely. Can you recommend any books that we should read?
Yes, I mentioned Give and Take before. I feel like that's really important. And I'm sorry I don't remember the name of the publisher. I could send that to you later. There's also another book called, and I'm just beginning to read this, but I think it's going to be really important. Although it's written maybe not necessarily for musicians, there's a lot to take from it, called The Ultimate Sales Letter. And I think, for me, I feel like my newsletters could be better. And also, reaching out to people, I want to hone that skill. So the other thing I want to say is, like, when you're writing a piece, like especially for choral music, but maybe it also pertains to other type of music, is like when you're writing about a specific topic, I recommend the book on that topic that really speaks to you. For example, with the Choral Consortium that I did, the Refugee Awareness, I read City of Thorns by Ben Rollins, that just came out. It was on New York Times bestseller list back in beginning of 2016, I believe. Maybe it was 2017. And then my daughter gave me this other book because she knew I was doing the consortium, called The Only Road, which is like for middle school kids, by Alexandra Diaz. And it's both about refugees. So I recommend the book that speaks to the project that you're doing as well. I think that really helps you get into it, and also helps you be able to speak from a position of knowledge when you're working with the choirs or whatever group you're working with.
I think that's great advice. I really like that. All right, Michael, where can we find you on the internet, and how can we get a hold of you?
Well, I'm on Facebook and Twitter, although I'm on Facebook more. And my website is mbqstudio.com. I also have a different name for that, called listenafresh.com. I started that a long time ago, Listen Afresh. I just love that term. And that's where people can reach me.
Wonderful. Michael, I want to give you one last chance to share any thoughts or advice you might have. Or actually, let me change this. I know you prepared an answer, but I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball.
All right.
Why should people consider coaching, and how will it benefit them as they build their businesses? That's
a great question. And how much time do we have?
Well, how much time do you need?
I mean, there's so many reasons to consider coaching and to get a coach. The most important thing is that starting a self-publishing business, or even if you're not self-publishing, you're just being a composer. can be very solitary. It can be very lonely at times. And even when you have success, that doesn't necessarily translate into building right away into the next big milestone. There's these lulls, there's ups and downs. And to have a team around you is just so incredibly important. Having a coach means that you're with somebody who is at least a few steps ahead of you, probably even more than a few steps, has their own connections, and has, in your case, if you don't mind me just throwing this in, but also doing the podcast, you really do know a lot of people and have really dipped your toes in a lot of different areas of the business, which is really incredibly valuable to anybody that you work with. I've already, reaped the benefits of that when I, for example, it's a good example, even though I wasn't able to go, but I wanted to go to the Minneapolis ACDA National Conference.
Yeah.
And, you had some great advice for me as to how to make that work, because I had no budget at the time. And still I'm working with a very, low budget as I try to go from the red to the black, which is a process.
Mm-hmm.
But that advice that you gave me, was so valuable. And even though I didn't go to that, I used that advice when I went to a different conference by discussing with a distributor, in this case, I hope you don't mind me saying it, but J.W. Pepper, about ideas about how I could possibly work with them at their table, since they are now a distributor of my music, and although we haven't really worked anything out yet, I have names, I have people who know my name, and, I can easily see that a positive approach to this and a patient approach could lead to some kind of collaboration in the future. And boy, if I could get to work, with J.W. Pepper, at one of their tables, easier for somebody who's published by a large publishing company, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But still, I don't think it's out of the question for independent publishers, because they're really starting to embrace independent publishers at J.W. Pepper. So that advice you gave me really opened up a door. And I think that's kind of what coaching does, because you have this one-on-one, interaction, like I said, with somebody with more experience than you, that has more connections, and in your case is very patient and allows the person, as long as you do the work. I think working with you, your people that you work with have to do the work or else you're not going to get anything out of it.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
have to do the work, and once you do the work, you are just so gracious with your time and with your experience and everything. And so it's I think that's really the takeaway from what I've gotten from our experience together.
Well, thank you, Michael. That means a lot to me.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure, because, I feel that you've given me a lot, and, it's the least I could do. Okay?
Oh, no, Michael, I'm here to serve you, friend. And if anyone else is interested, reach out to me, say hi, and if it's right, I would love to work with you too. Michael, this has been a real pleasure for me to dig into your story and allow you a chance to share how you've been building your business and your journey and some of the challenges you faced. I hope that the people who are listening to this are encouraged and challenge themselves to go out and take the action, because that's the ingredient that will make the difference, is doing it.
Yes. Thank you, Gary.